This is my fun part about the French Revolution, and why I don't think people truly believe me when I say that we actually have things worse now, economically speaking, than the French peasantry had during the French Revolution. To put it into perspective, we've all heard about the income inequality here. Well, what if I told you the gap was actually larger, and the gap between the rich and the rest of us is worse today than it was in France before the French Revolution, before the guillotines? Yeah, yeah, and I think I'm going to pre-qualify everything I'm about to launch into with I don't think we feel it as much because we have more access to food. So we can still keep surviving.
That's interesting.
They did not. Let's start by looking at the income inequality in the US right now. The wealthiest 1% hold over 34% of the nation's wealth, while the bottom half of Americans hold just 2.5%. Meanwhile, the average CEO makes 351 times what the average worker earns annually. Just to give you an idea, this wasn't always the case. Back in the 1970s, it was more like 30 times. Again, Economic Policy Institute, CEO pay has skyrocketed 1,460% since 1978. So, historical context for you, pre-revolutionary France. We rewind to France in the late 1700s. French society was divided to three classes or estates. At the top was the clergy, followed by the nobility, and at the bottom, the commoners, who made up about 98% of the population. The wealth of the nobility and the clergy was so extreme that historians estimate they controlled around 50% of France's wealth. But unlike the US today, France's taxation system was completely skewed. The common people shouldered the majority of the tax burden, while the nobility and the clergy were largely exempt. Actually, that sounds kind of similar, doesn't it?
I'm seeing a bit of a parallelogram over here.
Yeah. These two things are similarly alike. But when we compare the two, it's where things get crazy. So we're going to talk about this thing called the Gini coefficient. It's a measure of income inequality, basically on a scale of 0 to 1. And 0 being everyone has a very equal share, 1 being like one person has all the money. So it's just 0 to 1. You might be wondering, on a scale of 0 to 1, where we stand right now. The US currently sits at 0.49, meaning there's most of the wealth concentrated at the top. So why does this matter? Well, in France, massive inequality led to widespread unrest, economic instability, and eventually revolution. People saw no way out of their poverty except to overthrow the system. They felt the elites were hoarding wealth, while the majority suffered under oppressive taxation and lack of opportunity. Say in the US, many feel similarly stuck. Wages for most Americans have stagnated while the cost of living continues to climb. Housing, healthcare, and education costs are out of control. Meanwhile, the rich have gotten exponentially richer, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Billionaires' wealth has hit $13.1 trillion as of 2021. Citation is Forbes themselves. Is history repeating itself? Are we on the brink of revolution? We can't ignore the fact that this same measure called France out at being 0.47. And we're at 0.49. Estimates range from 0.45 to 0.47. So we have it technically worse than the French peasantry when it comes to inequality. The monarchy ignored all of the cries for reform until it was too late. And today we're hearing the same cries from the both left and the right. People want change, whether it's through higher taxes on the wealthy, healthcare reform, or better society safety nets. It's all part of the same conversation. My posit here is, if history teaches us anything, it's that extreme inequality doesn't just make life harder for people at the bottom, it threatens the stability of society itself. And if we're not careful, we might find ourselves in a situation where the calls for reform grow louder and potentially way more dangerous.
And to think that the only thing keeping us from revolting right now is that we're well fed.
But even
I can see that. I would 100% buy that.
Because I mean, that's the main thing we need to keep.
Still buy that though. Lasting longer in poorer conditions than the French did is just something that we get to brag about. We win. We did it longer.
Yeah. God, I don't know if I want to brag about that. But yeah, no, this whole
this is America. Welcome to it.
This whole Gini coefficient is wild. Like, basically quantifying it with data and being like, man, we know the French Revolution led to horrible amounts of death and violent revolutions, and French are still very, very fond of rioting today, and maybe we should mimic them because technically we're letting things slip into a worse space.
We are. But America has a more relevant world economy. Or economy to the world, rather.
Touche. And again, that does also bring up one of the pieces. We have it pretty darn well when it comes to like the bare minimum we need to survive. It's just that's being eroded away so fast that like none of us see a great future.